Hi everybody, it's Rob Lutz. I'm back with another song from the history of popular music, broad term popular music that was popular. Because you can define popular music as music that was written to be popular, but a lot of folk music, classical music, and other traditions were not conceived for that purpose. They just were conceived for their own artistic merit or in response to realities that people were facing, but they became popular. So I have the broader definition of popular music. And this is one that goes back to at least the 1660s, and it may be the most widely shared, through the folk tradition, through the oral tradition, folk song in British American history. It's called Barbara Allen. It originated in England, but came here to Canada, to the U.S. with the early colonial settlers, was performed by people like Joan Baez and Jean Ritchie and many others, sort of in the folk revival. So this song has been kept alive. Why has it stayed alive? Well, it's an interesting tune. It's quite beautiful. It's a ballad. So it's really just a narrative. There's no actual chorus in the song, but there's kind of a refrain or the recurring name of the protagonist, this woman, Barbara Allen. These songs were shared through the oral tradition. They were also shared on broadsides, which were this basically just large pieces of paper, which were kind of like artistic newspapers. They had songs, they had illustrations, this kind of thing, and they would be shared in cities and often in what were called pleasure grounds or pleasure gardens. And this is as America began to urbanize, and this was true in Europe as well. You had these basically large gardens, walking gardens, where people could walk on pathways. Still many of them exist in cities around the States and in Europe, and sort of to have the illusion that you're in the country again, but they were manicured, and the trees were sort of symmetrically arranged. There were often gazebos for musical performances, and they were often limited to the upper classes. So they were fairly discriminatory places, but it is partly where these songs got shared. Ballads were some of the earliest popular music in colonial America and colonial Canada and in early America. And they typically had a bit of a warning in them. They're typically sad. They're often in minor keys. Barbara Allen is not in a minor key, but it's somewhat sad anyway, the melody. And there is a minor chord that features prominently in the song. But they typically carried warnings. In the same way that you might not want to tell your child, don't do that. You might want to say, when Uncle Ted did that, this is what happened. He was in the hospital for 6 weeks. Well, ballads kind of, functioned in a way that way. They presented situations where characters made decisions that led to their downfall. And so they could basically be used to teach people what not to do. And a lot of them, people get lost, people get killed, people go with the wrong person, this kind of thing. So in Barbara Allen, it's a little more subtle, but it's about a character named Sweet William who is in bed dying of love sickness. He's so in love with Barbara Allen, he cannot function in the world. His servant sends for Barbara Allen. She comes to his bedside, and we expect maybe she'll say something kind to him to lift his spirits. But she says, "Young man, I think you're dying." So upon hearing this, he turns toward the wall and he proceeds to die. Barbara Allen, once this has happened, is filled with regret, and she feels deep sadness that she has been responsible for this, and then she dies of sadness. They're buried side by side in the churchyard, and then this is the mystical part of the song, out of his heart a rose grows, and out of her heart a briar grows, and the two intertwine above the grave, and the rose grows over the briar, and this sort of forms this lover's knot, and I guess it's sort of a victory of love over cruelty, I guess you could say. And the warnings are pretty clear. The warning to someone like William, young men, don't fall so far in love with someone, so hard in love, that you can't function. You're literally going to die. You're not going to be able to live if you don't have this particular person. And the warning to the female in the song, to Barbara Allen, was, don't be cruel, or it will cause you great regret and sadness. Not that you have to go out with every guy that asks you, but maybe you could be sympathetic. And, so it sort of guided people morally in these ways and functionally. So here's Barbara Allen. yeah, it's just a pretty tune, and hope you enjoy this. If you do, hit like and subscribe. I've got lots more songs coming. 'Twas in the merry month of May, when green buds were swelling, sweet William on his deathbed lay, for the love of Barbara Allen. He sent his servant to the town, to the place where she was dwelling, saying, "You must come to my master dear, if your name be Barbara Allen." So slowly, slowly she got up, and slowly she drew nigh him, but the only words to him did say was, "Young man, I think you're dying." He turned his face unto the wall, and death was in him willing. Goodbye, goodbye to my friends all, be good to Barbara Allen. When he was dead and laid in the grave, she heard the death bells knelling, and every stroke to her did say, "Hard-hearted Barbara Allen." "Oh, mother, mother, dig my grave, make it both long and narrow. Sweet William died of love for me, and I will die of sorrow. Oh, Father, Father, dig my grave, make it both long and narrow. Sweet William died on yesterday, and I will die tomorrow." Barbara Allen was buried in the old churchyard. Sweet William was buried beside her. Out of sweet William's heart there grew a rose, out of Barbara Allen's a briar. Well, they grew and grew in the old churchyard, till they could grow no higher. At the end they formed a true lover's knot, and the rose grew round the briar. So that's Barbara Allen. Hit like and subscribe if you've enjoyed this, and we'll see you next time.